So the next thing that I want to go over is data types in Python. So there's a lot of different types of values that you can assign to variables. We won't go over a lot of them, but we will go over some of the basic ones. So for example, there is an integer, which would be a whole number. That could be 4, 10, I don't know, negative 45. Any whole number is represented as an integer, right? Or any integer is represented as a whole number. The next data type, here, let me add a comment real quick. So integer. The next data type is called a float, which is pretty much just a decimal number. So we can say x equals 2.52 or 52. Sorry, y. Y equals 3.14. You can do negatives as well, so minus 0.62. That would be a float, where it has a decimal value. And finally, we have what we call strings, which is just a sequence of characters as text. So that would be something like z equals hello. Z equals I am a string. Z equals 12. And now keep in mind here, we are writing out the number 12, but because it's between these quote marks, it's treated as a string. So it's actually just taking these literal characters 1 and 2 and not treating it like a number. So for example, if we did like 12 plus 12, you won't get 24. I'll show you that right here on the side in the shell. I'm not quite sure why the shell's not working, but okay. Unfortunately, the shell's not working, but I'll tell you right now, if you were to do 12 plus 12 like this, where they were strings rather than numbers, the answer would end up being 12, 12, and not 24, because it literally adds them together one after the other. Same thing goes for if I was to say hello, and then, I don't know, ABC, the answer would end up being hello ABC like this. It just connects them together. But that's not super important to know. What I want to cover is data types. So we have integers, which are whole numbers, just to recap. We have floats, which are decimal numbers. And we have strings, which are basically strings of text, sequence of characters that represent some text. So we've used these before as well in our print statements sometimes. We'll print some message like this, and we're printing out a string. And we can replace this with an integer or a float. So sometimes it's really useful for us to convert from one type to another. So like I mentioned, this looks a lot like the number 12, but it's not, it's a string, right? But we can convert it so that we can use it as a number. The way you would do that is you have to know what you want to convert it to first. So let's say I want to convert this into a integer. I will say, okay, a variable my int equals, and then you use the int function like this. And when you call a function, you use these open bracket, close bracket. And within those brackets, just put the string that you'd like to convert into an integer, which would be 12. And if I print my int, actually just to make things simpler, I'll swap out the number 12 here for z. And over here, I'll print z. So you can see the difference between the two. So if I run this, you'll see, well, it doesn't really quite show a difference. It would if I could go to the shell. They almost look identical, but in this case, if I did z plus z, or my int plus my int, you'll see that the first one will actually end up being 1212, and the second one will end up being 24, because we've managed to convert the second one into a number, so Python can actually treat it like a number and do proper arithmetic. So if I run this again, there we have 1212 and 24. So you could do the same thing with a float too. And if I do this, you'll notice Python will add the 0.0 at the end, just to let you know that this is a decimal number. It could have decimal values, even though it currently doesn't. So let's just add a 0.3 here to the end of z and run, and you'll see it becomes 24.6. And the string addition is 12.3, 12.3. So let me remove that part. And we can do the last type of casting, which would be casting to a string, which is not really completely necessary because Python will kind of do this for you automatically if necessary. But just in case, I'll cover it, where you would have, for example, my string equals, and the function here is str, and I can pass in the number 42.524, and oh, I didn't print it. I'm sorry. Print it out. You see it's printed out. But again, like I mentioned, you don't actually have to do this because Python will usually do it for you. So if I just print the number itself, it gets printed out the exact same way.